Some horror films don't just scare audiences, they test them. They push past comfort, past entertainment, into something confrontational and deeply unsettling. These are the movies that didn't simply generate screams, they generated exits. Viewers shuffled down aisles, unable to finish what they started. Festival premieres turned chaotic, critics argued, studios panicked. Word of mouth spread not about fun thrills, but about endurance. Whether because of graphic violence, suffocating atmosphere, psychological cruelty, or taboo subject matter, these films crossed a line for many people sitting in the dark. Yet controversy often becomes currency in horror. Walkouts transform into legends. Shock turns into fascination. And the very moments that drove some audiences away are the same ones that cemented these films into horror history. These are 10 horror films that caused audience walkouts and left theaters quieter, heavier, and permanently unsettled. Terrifier 2, 2022. Reports of fainting and vomiting circulated rapidly after screenings of this ultra-violent slasher sequel. Directed by Damien Leone, the film amplifies gore to almost cartoonish extremes. Its extended runtime and elaborate kill sequences test stamina. Audiences unprepared for its practical effects found themselves overwhelmed. Social media buzz centered on viewers leaving theaters mid-film. Yet horror fans praised its commitment to practical craftsmanship and relentless energy. The character Art the Clown became an icon of modern grindhouse brutality. While many embraced its audacity, others could not endure its graphic intensity. The walkouts became marketing fuel, drawing curious viewers eager to test their limits.
Mother, 2017. Directed by Darren Aronofsky, this allegorical horror triggered confused and angry walkouts upon release. Audiences expecting a conventional thriller were confronted with escalating chaos and religious symbolism. Jennifer Lawrence anchors the film with mounting panic as her home becomes a stage for apocalyptic intrusion. The final act spirals into overwhelming sensory assault. The camera rarely leaves her perspective, trapping viewers in claustrophobic dread. Its metaphorical structure divided critics and alienated mainstream audiences. Some found it profound, others found it incomprehensible and punishing. The cinema score rating reflected the shock. Walkouts were common during opening weekend, transforming the film into a lightning rod for debate about ambition versus accessibility.
Antichrist, 2009. Another divisive work from Lars von Trier, this psychological horror stunned Cannes audiences with explicit imagery and emotional brutality. Willem Dafoe and Charlotte Gainsbourg portray a grieving couple descending into madness within an isolated forest. The film blends art house symbolism with shocking physical violence. Several viewers reportedly left during its most graphic sequences. Its meditation on grief, guilt, and gender politics is relentless. Nature itself feels hostile, amplifying dread. For some, it was visionary and poetic. For others, it was simply unbearable. The controversy surrounding its premiere cemented its status as one of the most polarizing horror experiences of the modern era.
Raw, 2016. At festival screenings, reports circulated of paramedics attending to fainting viewers. Directed by Julia Ducournau, this coming-of-age body horror centers on cannibalistic awakening. Its graphic imagery and visceral sound design tested endurance. The transformation of its protagonist unfolds gradually, but unflinchingly. Flesh-tearing and bodily craving are depicted without euphemism. While some viewers praised its metaphorical depth, others found the imagery intolerable. Walkouts occurred not only from disgust, but from emotional unease. The film blurs lines between appetite and identity, presenting horror as biological inevitability. Its artful direction and fearless performance by Garance Marlier elevated it beyond shock value. Still, the physical reactions at screenings became part of its narrative. It proved that body horror remains capable of overwhelming even modern, desensitized audiences.
Irreversible, 2002. Directed by Gaspard Noé, this French psychological horror opened at Cannes to stunned silence and visible departures. Its reverse chronology and relentless camera work disoriented audiences from the first frame. A prolonged, unflinching assault sequence pushed many viewers past endurance. The film's low-frequency sound design reportedly induced nausea, intentionally unsettling the body as well as the mind. Walkouts were widely reported during festival screenings. Monica Bellucci delivered a performance of vulnerability that felt painfully real, intensifying discomfort. The violence was not stylized or cathartic, it was cruel and punishing. Critics debated whether it was exploitation or art. Regardless of perspective, few could deny its impact. It became infamous for dividing rooms in real time, leaving seats empty long before the credits rolled.
The Blair Witch Project, 1999. Marketed as recovered footage rather than traditional fiction, this micro-budget phenomenon blurred reality and performance. Directed by Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez, its shaky handheld camera work induced nausea in many viewers. The absence of visible monsters heightened anxiety rather than easing it. Audiences accustomed to polished studio horror found themselves trapped in relentless screaming and disorientation. Reports surfaced of motion sickness and frustrated walkouts from those expecting conventional scares. Its minimalist approach denied visual payoff, ending abruptly without resolution. Yet that very ambiguity made it terrifying for others. The sense that it could be real amplified dread beyond the screen. Some left because nothing happened. Others left because it felt like something terrible had happened. Either way, it proved that suggestion can be as overwhelming as spectacle.
The Exorcist, 1973. When it premiered, reports described viewers fainting, vomiting, and fleeing theaters mid-screening. Directed by William Friedkin, the film's raw depiction of demonic possession felt disturbingly real. Religious imagery, unsettling medical procedures, and the performance of Linda Blair combined to create an atmosphere that felt less like fiction and more like spiritual assault. The sound design amplified dread, from guttural voices to violent thuds that rattled seats. Audiences in the early 70s were unprepared for horror presented with such seriousness and intensity. Long lines formed outside cinemas, but so did stories of people leaving before the climax. What made it unbearable for some became magnetic for others. The controversy fueled its box office dominance. Decades later, it remains one of the most psychologically disturbing theatrical experiences ever recorded. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974. Audiences in the 70s were not prepared for the grimy brutality unleashed by director Tobe Hooper. Shot with documentary-style realism, the film felt disturbingly authentic. The relentless screaming, claustrophobic interiors, and sudden violence overwhelmed many viewers. Reports of fainting and early exits followed its initial screenings. Unlike polished studio horror, it offered no safe distance. Marilyn Burns delivered a performance of sustained terror that bordered on unbearable. The dinner table sequence alone pushed some audiences beyond tolerance. Despite minimal on-screen gore compared to Reputation, its intensity created an illusion of excess. That rawness caused walkouts, but also cemented its place in horror history. It demonstrated that atmosphere and sound can be more punishing than explicit imagery, leaving audiences shaken long after leaving the theater. Hereditary, 2018. Modern horror rarely creates mass discomfort, but director Ari Aster shattered expectations with suffocating dread. Early screenings reportedly saw viewers leaving during its shocking midpoint tragedy. Toni Collette delivered a performance of raw grief so intense it bordered on unbearable. The film lingers on trauma rather than rushing to supernatural spectacle. Silence stretches painfully. Family arguments escalate into emotional violence. The horror feels intimate and personal rather than distant. Some audiences expected conventional scares and were confronted instead with existential despair. The oppressive atmosphere proved too heavy for certain viewers. Yet those who stayed found a meticulously crafted descent into madness. Walkouts became part of its legend, reinforcing its reputation as a film that does not comfort, but confronts. The House That Jack Built, 2018. Directed by Lars von Trier, this serial killer portrait divided Cannes audiences dramatically. Graphic violence and philosophical monologues collided in a deliberately provocative structure. During its premiere, numerous attendees reportedly walked out. The film does not glamorize its killer, but forces viewers into his disturbing perspective. Scenes linger past comfort, testing moral boundaries. Matt Dillon delivers a chillingly detached performance that intensifies unease. Von Trier's history of controversy amplified expectations, and the film met them unapologetically. For some, it was a meditation on art and evil. For others, it was intolerable excess. The Walkouts became headline news, reinforcing its reputation as an endurance test rather than entertainment.
Horror has always thrived on pushing boundaries, but these films crossed thresholds that some audiences were unwilling or unable to endure. Walkouts are not always signs of failure. Sometimes they signal confrontation, artistic risk, or cultural tension surfacing in real time. Each of these films generated reactions powerful enough to empty seats and spark headlines. Whether through graphic violence, emotional devastation, or psychological suffocation, they demanded more than passive viewing. They required endurance. Over time, controversy often transformed into prestige or cult devotion. The very elements that drove people from theaters became the reasons others sought them out. Fear is subjective, tolerance varies, and expectations shape experience. But when a film can physically or emotionally overwhelm a room full of strangers, it has tapped into something primal. These horror films did not simply entertain, they tested limits and left an undeniable mark on cinematic history.